Thank you very much, Mr. Ramsey Campbell, for joining us today. By the way, how do you like to be called?
Oh,
Mr.
Ramsey,
Campbell?
Ramsey's
Ramsey?
good. Ramsey's
Call me
good.
Bruce.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
No, this is a wonderful meeting for me. I mean, I've been reading your stuff since I was a wee lad, starting off way back when this is the first time just to show I have this book. It has
Aha,
full print
yes,
in it. Yes. And
yeah,
that's when I first came across it. And then I was so lucky to actually get this book from
it was.
1985, which
Yeah.
a cold print with the wonderful Yagolanak, one of my favorite creations you created. I mean, you created so many cool things. Daleoff, Yagolanak, Ehort. I'm afraid to pronounce the most famous one, I guess, is
Oh,
Glaaki.
Glaaki.
Yeah. There's
That's the guy.
yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, but I know that you've been involved with so much since then. I mean, I'm looking forward to talking to you about your creative journey because I know you started off with kind of Cthulhu Mythos things and created your entire own mythos from that.
Yeah.
But then you went into other forms of horror, and then you're making films, or some of your work has been turned to films. You've even written a book on the Three Stooges,
Yes, yes.
which it sounds amazing. But yeah, and you've been kind enough too for some of my projects. You let me create a character of you as
Sure.
a scholar in my mysterious world called Mism, an expert
Yes,
on
yes.
eldritch horror. And
Yeah,
there
yeah,
is
yeah.
kind of like some tributes in there to Ehort and Yagolanak as a Jack the Ripper type character. So I thank you
Uh,
very much because you're a very generous, kind person for letting people uh like take your work and share it with a
oh, my
broader
pleasure.
audience.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
like I mean, I even like you even like do it for like board games
Oh,
and so on. And I have all these
yes.
wonderful things. I don't know if they well, I'll show pictures later on when I edit this
Yeah.
together, some of these cool creatures. But yeah, with that intro,
Mhm.
welcome.
Thank you.
I just wanted to kind of find out like how did you even get into this whole field in the first place?
Oh, no, yeah, this is the half an hour answer you wanted it, presumably, or do you want the 5 minute
It,
version? Uh,
Oh, you can go as long as you like. Because I
okay.
mean, what I think is the most important thing for what I'm trying to do here is helping people understand people's creative journeys. Like,
Mhm.
especially someone like you who's been at it for decades, but has
God knows.
not
Yeah.
like thrown it in. Like a lot of
Yeah, yeah.
people like say,
Mhm.
okay, it's getting hard, so now I'll stop and go to some other job or something like that.
No, no,
But you've
too
been
much.
at it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
too much still to write. No, they'll nail me down. I'll still be writing. Basically, you'll hear the pen inside the coffin. Basically, I
Well,
think.
what I heard is writers write. And that's kind of
Yeah.
their reason d'etre. But how did you know about that? When did it first kind of kick in for you? Like,
Well, I mean, really going all the way back. I mean, I was a hideously precocious kid, particularly in terms of readings. I mean, Wilbur Whateley had nothing on me, believe me. So, I was reading really not many M.R. James. I was reading Edith Wharton when I was 6 years old. I mean,
mm,
specifically, a book called an anthology called 50 Years of Ghost Stories that had some great M.R. James, E.F. Benson, oh gosh, who else did we get? Le Fanu, obviously. Um,
yeah.
and so, I basically, that's where I began. My mother used to let me use her adult ticket in the local public library so I could take out all these things. And in fact, I was never stopped. The only time I remember I was stopped by a librarian who said, "Oh, no, no, you mustn't take that," was Gogol, was Dead Souls. I don't know why, but, uh, you know, um, horror stories were perfectly fine insofar as they could be found. In those days, mind you, we talk about the early 1950s. They were mostly packaged as ghost stories or supernatural stories, but there was a great deal of overlap with horror. And basically,
Mm,
I suppose I'd already fallen in love with it in a kind of nervous way, even younger than that. I mean, I sought out stuff that was frightening, basically, whatever form it might take. I mean, initially children's fiction or fiction packaged as being for kids, like Hans Andersen. Well, I mean, Hans Andersen wasn't particularly writing for children, and certainly some of his, darker and bleaker stuff is much more pitched at an adult audience, I think. And I still remember The Little Mermaid and the whole episode where she's transformed and basically separate. Her tail is separated, and depending on the translation you read, she feels as if she's walking on barefoot on broken glass or on open razor blades, I think it was in the edition I had. And eventually, in the very last paragraph, the angels come and bear her up. But I got to tell you, I always believed more in the razor blades than the angels, even that young, which tells us something about me, I don't doubt. Um, I
But
didn't
yeah,
read.
I was just gonna jump in then. Like, yeah, I
Mhm,
mean, going back to Grimm's fairy tales and all that, like everything's
mhm.
been kind of patterned down into Disney-esque kind of happy endings and so on. But I also like the fact
Except,
that
except, mind you, have you seen the new movie, The Ugly Stepsister? The Ugly Stepsister. Uh,
no.
oh dear me, it's Scandinavian, and
Oh,
it
that's why.
takes the elements of the Cinderella story, and the most disturbing or the most graphic. And you may recall that one of the stepsisters has to cut her toes off to try and fit into the. Well, believe me, that is here in great detail, and very disturbing it is. So not Disney hasn't got everywhere yet, not yet.
That's good. Yeah, that's why I watch lots of like European, Asian films and so on.
Hmm.
They still try to stick to it. It's like, ah, the ending might not be happy. I'd
Yeah.
like
Oh,
not to know
yeah.
that. But I thought
Speak
there was
no
something
evil.
very
Speak no evil. You seen
right.
that movie?
Yeah, I the American version and
No,
the
no, the
original.
original.
And
The
yeah, the
original.
original is like so disturbing. And so I
Yeah,
had
yeah.
do you watch and The Vanishing? You ever see The Vanishing, the
Yes. Oh, yeah.
original and then the
Yes.
American? It's like,
Mm,
oh my God. But
yeah.
I was just going to say something that you also raised, which I thought was really interesting, is ghost stories. Yeah, and M.R.
Mm,
James. It wasn't
mm.
just ghosts, right? As you said, it's like all sorts of things they
Oh,
packaged under
yes.
there, which is like they had demons, weird
Yeah.
eldritch monsters, all sorts of
Yeah, yeah,
strange
yeah.
stuff that I guess they just packaged. And E.F. Benson,
Very much
yeah,
so.
he what was I always forget that I can never pronounce it because it's in Latin. I'm not the one where there's a giant slug creature that
Oh, no, that's E.F. Benson.
yeah, that's
Negotiation
right. That one
for
I always love that one.
Amberland. Yes, yes.
Exactly. I love that
Yeah.
story. I mean, it's
Mm.
amazing. So you were reading all that as a kid, just
I was
absorbing it
indeed.
all.
Yeah, yeah. No, I mean, to be honest, I started off writing science fiction, and you may be pleased to hear I'm not going to read any of it to you because at 7.5 years old, I think I was. Black Fingers from Space, a novel. Well, it didn't get to be a novel. It would have been a novel if I'd completed it, but it only got about 2,000 words, I think, and 2,000 words of deathless prose. Let me tell you. Um, and then, gosh, I think I may have written almost an entire short novel in imitation of Clifford Simak, his novel City, in which, the
Mhm.
dogs take over and become the dominant race. Very strange novel. But mine was Dogs in the Stratosphere was my story.
Well, they
And
go.
again, it's lost to humanity, and humanity may breathe a sigh of relief, let me say.
Maybe,
Uh,
but Planet of the Dogs. They had Planet of the Apes.
oh
Planet of
yeah,
the
yeah,
Dogs. It would probably
that's
been
right.
even more interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah. And then 11 years old, I actually did write a complete short story collection called Ghostly Tales. And then my old friend Bob Price, Robert M. Price, he published it as an issue of his little magazine, The Call of Cthulhu, if we're going to pronounce him that way. Let's assume that's how we pronounce him.
Right.
And there were stories with a beginning, a middle, and an end. They weren't very good, but there were stories, and they were basically stuck together from bits of favorite stories that I'd already read. So they didn't necessarily fit together. Although there was one, a hugely ambitious thing, all of 4,000 words long, I'll have you know, which was basically a sort of Reader's Digest version of The Devil Rides Out,
Hmm.
which I'd recently read. And so I kind of stumbled along, imitating in all directions very haphazardly, and began to find models to imitate. But it was really when I was 14. And you may find this difficult to believe, you and our listeners now, but in 1960, there had never been a single paperback collection of Lovecraft published in Britain. It didn't exist. There hadn't been one.
Hmm.
And the very first one that came out was actually edited by Don Walheim back in the 40s when he worked at Avon paperbacks, called Cry Horror, it was called, or this new
Hmm.
edition was. Um, I found it as a sort of it wasn't even a bookshop actually, it was a sort of general store. of which there were a lot in those days, that would sell the odd few dozen books, and here it was in the window. And I thought, my God, it's £0.50. Do I have £0.50 in my pocket? And, if I don't, if I go away and come back, it'll have gone. I'll never see it again. I'll be lost. It'll be lost forever. And luckily, I did have the £0.50. So I bought the book and took it home. And the next day, I blagged my way off school, basically, and stayed home and just read it from cover to cover. And, it had it had some minor stuff like the Moonbog and the Unnameable, but it also had some of its greater, including the Call of Cthulhu, and I was pronouncing differently. There you are, and the Rats on the Walls, and The Colour Out of Space, which I had read when I was 8 in a collection, an anthology, I beg your pardon, from the library. And I'd found that really disturbing. I mean, James had been frightening, Le Fanu had been frightening. Lovecraft seemed to dig deeper. I actually felt there was something almost transgressive here. If my mother saw what I was reading, she said, "Oh, you mustn't read that." She didn't, in fact. Whether she would have, I don't know. But I did find it profoundly disturbing. And here it was again 6 years later, and I reread it, and it's basically the same effect. And I mean, now I'm 14 years old, and I concluded not merely that Lovecraft was the greatest horror writer I had ever read, the writer to whom the entire field led, basically, but the greatest writer I'd ever read. But that's overdoing it. Come on, guys. But I'm only 14 after all. But pretty shortly after that, I thought this is what I want to do. And so I started imitating Lovecraft, and by gum did I imitate. So even though I'd never been more than a couple of hours away from Liverpool, I was still setting them in Massachusetts. And it was very plain that I'd never been to America, and certainly never listened to any rustic Massachusetts folk. But I set them in Arkham and Kingsport and the like. Wrote several of them, and it was a friend who'd a correspondent of mine, Pat Kearney, who was then a fanzine editor and writer, who ultimately became a historian of erotica. He did a book on the Olympia Press, for instance. But back then he was doing, he was a fellow fan, and he suggested I should send them to August Derleth over at Arkham House, just for an opinion. It wasn't that I wanted to. I had no thoughts of anything else. So I wrote this, airmail letter saying, "Dear Mr. Derleth, you are obviously the world's leading authority on Lovecraft, and I've written these stories, in that vein, and I was wondering if you'd care to give your opinion of whether they're any good or not." Got a letter back from Derleth saying, "First of all, we need to see these stories before you do anything with them, because we own the copyright on Lovecraft's concepts." Well, that's arguable, but anyway, what the hell? That's what he said. And so I duly sent the stories, such as those, I typed them up, sent, I think, 4 or 5 of them over to him, and then didn't hear for some weeks about them. Eventually got a letter back saying these stories need a lot of work. By gum, did they ever? That's certainly true. And you need to get your characters to speak rather than just report it. And you need to flesh it out. You need to tone down the overwriting, and you need to move the whole setup to England so that it's not simply imitation. Arkham. But if you do all this, and if you've got if you are able to write more stories in this similar area, I do think we may be able to publish it from Arkham House. But, here I'm 15 years old, and that's fighting talk, by gum. So after I'd spent half an hour muttering to myself about being told I had to change do this and do that editorially, I then began to see he was right. And obviously also I thought, my gum, maybe I may have an Arkham House book to my name. And so I duly did all the work and did more stories. In fact, he published my first professionally published story in an anthology in '62, book called Dark Mind, Dark Heart. And here I was alongside Robert Bloch and John Metcalf and H. Russell Wakefield, by gum. Now, he did edit the story with my say-so a little bit, because he felt it needed it. He was right, still needed some sort of compacting and speeding up and pacing, that sort of thing. But the book he published of mine, the first book, he left alone. He let me. I mean, I'd edited that in terms of how he'd shown me to edit with that first story, and that came out when I was 18. And there was old, the Aki, although he didn't then have an apostrophe. Let me say he sprouted that later on. And Deoloth, and as you say, I can't pronounce my own creation here. He came along some years later. But I mean, one of the things you were saying at the very outset, but one of the things I found amazing and sort of touching and humbling is, how these creatures seem to take on their own life, and how indeed, people are writing about them, and there's heavy metal music about them, and there's amazing numbers of paintings and drawings of them. And all I did was I wrote this thing when I was 16, and they're still out there, and livelier than ever. So I must have done something right, or maybe they did it and I'm just the conduit for it.
Thank you.
One of the things, there's a few things that pop into my mind. It gets back to as general artists, I think, and I think writing is an art.
Yes,
you took a bunch of different giants in the field, and you learn from them. And you imitate them to kind of. But then you take the alchemical mix, which I say to almost everybody on this particular show, and you start mixing it all together, and something innovative pops out. But the other major step was you took risks, which was you were willing to share your work, which not everyone is, and you're even willing to send to August Derleth, who, if it wasn't for him, maybe Cthulhu and everything, or however you want to pronounce Cthulhu, would never be still known. But he pushed it. But he also acted in a good way that he actually did his editorial goodness to you. Like, I'm not just going to say, go away, kid, you bother me. Then I'm going to give you feedback, real feedback, and help you along, which I think is very important for all artists, is mentors and like-minded people that, let's help each other out. And then next thing you know, things pop out.
Yeah.
But
Well, I mean, this
yeah,
is it, you see. I mean, Lovecraft was his mentor, Derleth, when he was the same age as I was, or, a little bit older. Well, of course, Derleth and I then had a 10-year correspondence, which, included editorial stuff, but also a great deal else. But then, I've tried to pass this on too, and help other writers. And as you say, so it goes on. But now this alchemical stuff. You see, after I'd finished that first book, and it was extraordinary, it's one of those happy coincidences. I'd actually just pretty well just finished the final story that would appear in The Inhabitant of the Lake, that first book. And I then encountered Nabokov, specifically Lolita. There it is, The Inhabitant. Yes, yes.
I got
Um,
them all.
and it just found it on a station bookstall. Now, admittedly, at that time, it had a sort of reputation as being a naughty book, a forbidden book to some. Well, of course, it was then. By then, it had been published in Britain, but there had been controversy about whether it should be or was going to be published, which indeed, it ultimately was. One of the reasons I bought it was that there was a quote from Graham Greene, who was already a great favourite of mine, on the back. And I thought, well, maybe there's more to it than that. So, but I mean, I started reading it just a few pages in, and I realized just how much more there was than I was expecting. Just, my jaw began to drop really. And this kind of relish of language and the extraordinary sort of comic aspect of it, comedy on the most unlikely topics, and the sort of oblique approach to the subject. All this was just an absolute revelation. I mean, just as Lovecraft had been to me when I was 14, so Nabokov now was when I turned 17. And again, I felt, this is what I want to do. And while I didn't immediately take that route, it certainly opened me up to possibilities. And I think it was because of this that my second book was, or partly because of this, that my second book was a complete departure, or very largely a complete departure from Lovecraft. And, I began to find my own way and my own style, which certainly drew upon. It's a strange combination, both Nabokov and Lovecraft and Graham Greene and M.R. James, but somehow it's all there, and maybe it's, I hope, a coherent whole of some kind.
Well, it's interesting too, because and maybe I'm stretching this, but just going back to Cold Print, and I can ask, why did you put Cold Print as the title of that book? But how the protagonist, I guess he's a protagonist.
Yeah,
And
well,
what you
yeah.
told me your own journey, like, oh, I went to this bookstore and I saw the book for the half a crown,
Oh,
the
yeah.
book that is forbidden in the
Yes, yeah,
bookstore. Now you're
yeah,
saying, oh, it's Lolita, the forbidden book in the
yeah,
bookstore.
yes.
And Cold Print is the forbidden book
Oh,
in the
yes.
bookstore.
Oh, yes.
And the revelations. He said, I had a revelation. It's the revelations of Galaki. It's like,
That's
oh,
right. That's
like it's
right.
like your own person. It's not just the material of what it's your own life in a
Oh,
sense. All
without any
stuck.
doubt. Yes, there's lots
Yeah,
of there. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Sure.
which is really cool. But I was going to go back to again. You were talking about how you went, but I guess the question is why as well versus why not write about Doc Samson or
Mm.
sports or
Yeah, yeah.
sci-fi? How did horror and things like appeal to you? And like again, I don't know, like I don't know if they call it nerd culture nowadays, and I'm definitely a nerd. Back then, is there such a thing? Or like you're like, hey, in school, you were considered, hey, he's that kid who reads all that strange stuff. Or
Oh,
like,
well, yeah, there was some of that. Although to be fair, I got a few friends also, even at school, who read in that area too. There's
yeah,
a guy I sadly lost touch with, a guy called Kevin Bulger, who was very much into Lovecraft, pretty well as much as I was, and into horror movies as well. Because this is another thing you see, which is not strictly relevant, but maybe fun to talk about a little. I mean, what you may not realize is that in England, virtually all horror movies or, films with any kind of, horrific element had an X rating, an X certificate, which meant you theoretically had to be 16 or over to get in. I mean, okay, or you passed at 16. And depending on the cinema, they might be increasingly lenient about, how closely they scowled at you when you went up to the box office. But the fact remains that, until I was 14, I was missing all these movies. And so once I turned, well, no, actually, I was, getting towards 15, I suppose, I was able to bluff my
Sneak
way.
in
Yeah, yeah. Or not even sneak, but,
into the forbidden. Yes.
bluff my, exactly, there we are again, you see, bluff my way past the box office and, pay me half a grand it would be again, and get to see all these movies that I'd already read about in famous monsters of filmland in many instances. Because I've been reading that for years, and you're just desperate to see all the films I'd seen illustrated and talked about, and now I could, and so off I went. And I have to say that one of the very first I ever saw remains my absolute favorite of all time, and that's Jacques Tourneur's, or Jake's Turner's, what do you want to call him, Night of the Demon, also known as Curse of the Demon.
Oh yeah, based on M.R. James casting the runes. One of my favorite
So,
films too. Yes,
it
yes.
it all fits together. You see, all fits together. Yeah, yeah.
Oh yeah.
But then, as far as the sort of nerd thing, well, that was more conventions and fanzines back in those days, and there were science fiction conventions, and there would always be one at Easter in England or Britain. So I'd always go to that pretty well.
Mhm.
And that was there weren't that many others back then, but that's where we all got together. And obviously, gradually more and more people joined, and the sort of the whatever you want to call it, the secret brood became less secret, and we all basically came out into the open after a while, and now look at it, it's all exploded. Yeah, I suppose, who knows, maybe Star Wars was the catalyst. All of a sudden SF was not something you had to mutter about under your breath. It was something everybody was going to see.
Yeah, once the mainstream says, "Oh, it's okay," but then yes, but then the core spirited people keep going.
Yes.
And what's interesting too then is you just kept on going and going. What,
Sure.
so you're successful all the way, or did you ever hit some rough patches, or it's like,
Oh, good Lord. Well, it was what you call successful. I was writing all right, but the books, put it this way. The first book, The Inhabitant, as we you have displayed to the world, that was 64. I didn't actually go full time until 1973, by which time Jenny and I, my wife, we'd been married a couple of years. And we discussed it. We thought, well, if I'm going to give it a shot, because in those days I was now working in the public libraries, having been a customer of those for many years. But if I was going to give it a shot, the full-time thing, then do it now before we've got kids, or never. So I did it then. And if Jenny had not kept us with her money, her income from teaching for the next 5 years, I very much doubt you'd be talking to me now. So yeah, it was not immediate or easy, but eventually, the first novel, that is to say, I beg your pardon, The Doll Who Ate His Mother, a memorable title, if nothing else, came out in 76 and did very badly, bad reviews, worse sales. And then the second book, The Face That Must Die, I wrote, and nobody wanted to do it because they said it was too grim. So I then wrote The Parasite, as something of a concoction, with my agent Kirby Macaulay's advice and input. And that did okay. That did pretty well. It's not very good, but although I know some people still cite it as an influence, so I shouldn't do it down too much and say not do them down at all. But
or the test of time eventually, when people look back, go, "Hey, wait, this is actually good," but
yeah,
we didn't realize it at the time with your huge backlist.
Well, you see, the weird thing was The Face That Must Die was eventually published. I mean, it was actually published by Jeff Connor, and illustrated by J.K. Potter, same as that copy of Cold Print you've got there.
Yeah.
And it's never really been out of print since. So
Those
I must
it's a
have
great
done
book.
Yeah, they're great editions, those. Yeah.
He's got some really good art.
Oh gosh, yes.
I'll put some I'll put some images in it when we edit this together for people to take
I
a
know
peek at.
JK's a genius. Yeah.
Yeah, so a lot of it is struggling through,
Oh
which is
yeah.
yeah. And I guess that one of the other aspects to this particular things I like to talk about is to again, people do go through lots of stresses through this, and I often wonder about the connections between the arts, creativity, and mental health too, or mental
Mm.
wellness. About
Yeah,
going
yeah.
through this, putting through it, or being inspired. And again, a lot of the eldritch Cthulhu horror, Yog Sothory, or Yugolanakery involves
Yeah.
people losing their sanity a
Oh
lot of the
yeah,
time too.
yeah,
So I don't
yeah.
know if you have any insights or things you wanted to share or not. I mean, it's often an interesting topic, but
Oh gosh, yes. I mean, yeah. I mean, it's not only the Lovecraftian stories of mine, but a lot of stories are concerned with, mental collapse or mental breakdown. And I mean, the fundamental reason that my preoccupation with that, I think, is my mother was an undiagnosed paranoid schizophrenic.
uh,
For, well, for virtually, as far as I know, for her almost the entirety of her life, certainly all that I know about, all that was my personal experience. And I mean, well, 3 years old, really, I was having to distinguish what was real from what she perceived. And, so the neighbors weren't really conspiring against her, and they weren't really writing letters under assumed names to the newspaper that were really about her. And the radio programs weren't really full of coded messages aimed at her. And, I knew that wasn't the case. So, which is interesting, like 3 years old, I don't really twig this, But I suppose,
mhm,
there was one incident where I thought, no, that is not right. That's not what you're saying. That didn't happen. I was there, but 3 years old, nobody's going to listen to you, obviously. But this was basically how I grew up, and you accepted that's what it's like. That's your childhood. It's normal as far as you're concerned. That's how
mhm,
life works. It was only very gradually I began to think, well, actually, not everybody it does live this way, but in all conscience, however disturbing it was in some ways, there was that, and there was the fact that she'd split up with my father when I was about three. But we all lived in the same house. It was a tiny suburban
mm,
house, just 2 rooms downstairs, 3 bedrooms, not very big ones, and a bathroom, toilet. But because they were estranged, I actually didn't see him face to face for about 20 years. He was the presence on the other side of the door, the turning doorknob, the footsteps coming upstairs at night. So he became this kind of monstrous, unseen figure, not least because my mother portrayed him in that fashion. So, basically, having said all this, you see me now, I think basically having drawn upon this for material. So I can't be altogether ungrateful for it, however, painful it may have been, particularly for the participants at the time. Something has come out of it. So, that nothing is wasted for the writer, it seems to me.
yeah, and what you're describing again is about the whole concept of reality and scary things behind doors, but also, yeah,
Hmm.
delusions, firm fixed beliefs that which a lot of the horror stories that you were writing and reading about is all about conspiracies and people not
Yes.
believing in these things. But yeah,
Yeah.
and I don't know, like again, I myself and other people too, like who've gone through our own encounters with mental
Yeah.
health.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually write or do art or read about it because it kind of feels familiar in a strange way. Like, oh, it's
Mm-hmm.
kind of grappling with it. I don't know if it's a
Yeah. Yeah.
metaphor, but it's like I can still keep attacking it in a way or keep grappling with it or accepting it or bringing it into my life in a way that's
Yeah.
more
Yeah.
understandable because yeah, that's interesting, although I guess your mom was still scared about you reading certain things anyways. Pretty odd,
There
yes.
were things she
Yeah,
didn't approve of. I mean,
yeah.
I mean, Black Magic for some reason that was out. So well, it was
Magic.
eventually reading Dennis Wheatley, obviously, but for some
Oh, that
reason,
magic.
yeah, Black Magic witchcraft stories about that she had a down on. So everything else was okay, and obviously, some M.R. James is about that, but she presumably didn't notice that.
Oh yeah, because it's under ghost stories, and I
Yeah,
guess once
that's
you
what
have
we.
a different title you can slip other things into it and
Yeah,
so on.
yeah, yes, yes.
But one of the things too, besides horror though, because you
Hmm.
did write another book that before we came on here, and I had known about it. It's interesting because other people I've talked to all love this particular group as well, the
Yes.
Three Stooges,
Ah, now we're
which seems
talking. Yes.
well, yeah, humor and horror to me have always had an interesting connection.
Let
Anyways,
me depart from the screen for a minute, and I shall find the book. Hold on.
okay.
I shall flourish it at you. Here we go. Yes, here I hope that we can see. Can
Yes.
we see that? Yeah.
Yes, you can, and I'll put an image of it too here, and a
Okay,
link to
all right.
Amazon too.
Excellent, excellent. But
So
yes,
tell me,
gosh,
tell
go
me more
on.
about it.
Well, where do I begin? Well, at the beginning, obviously, that's where I begin. That makes sense. Okay, I'll go all the way back because we have what was at the time an alternative television channel called Channel 4. And when that was set up back in the 80s, it was genuinely meant to be doing things other channels didn't do. So, I mean, some of which was very bad, some of which was very, very transgressive, very confrontational. And one of the things they did, which doesn't really fit into any of those categories, but was not being done elsewhere, they ran Three Stooges two-reelers on weekday afternoons. And a friend of mine, sadly now long gone, a guy called John Owen, who also was also published in that first Arkham House anthology I was in, funny enough, under the name of Frank Mace. But that's a peripheral observation. He was a great Stooges fan. He said he regarded them as being better than Laurel and Hardy. Well, I'm sorry, I'm not going that far. No, I mean Laurel and Hardy are inimitable and unequaled as far as I'm concerned. But I duly watch these Stooges shorts on in the afternoons, and I didn't laugh. I mean, I thought these are peculiar. I don't really get it. It's not reaching me. It's not engaging me. But I kept coming back. I kept coming back, and I think, I'll watch another one. They're on, so let me go and watch it. And it was a bit of a break as well because the time of day was just about right because I'd have finished whatever I was doing writing in the morning because I write every day. But in the afternoon, I'll do a different, something like proofreading or writing non-fiction or something like that. But, that break at that point was useful. And it's actually one of the things I've said, talked about in the book is I don't know whether I've come to this conclusion that more than anything else, I think comedy, when we first encounter it, needs us sometimes to adjust to its particular style in the way that reading prose fiction or watching a director's films doesn't necessarily. But if the comedy has an individual quality, then we need to get on that wavelength. I mean, sometimes it's immediately funny, but often it's not. And certainly I found it with the Stooges. So anyway, eventually they ran out of them on Channel 4. That was the end of that for some decades. And then some splendid person at Sony Pictures in the home video section put together a sequential, consecutive bunch of slipcase sets of all those shorts on DVD. And I thought, well, I could have another look at these. And so I duly bought them as they came out. And I looked at them and thought, well, actually, there's a bit more here. And there's a bit, I am laughing occasionally, to my surprise, but, and that guy Curly, he's pretty funny at times. And it was around then, I think, that my old friend Pete Crowther at PS Publishing, PS now in Britain, they also have a movie monograph imprint called Electric Dream House, and they wanted me to do a monograph on a film. Now, I did think of doing Night of the Demon, but that had in fact already been done. And anyway, I thought, am I really capable of doing 20,000 words on a single film? I wasn't so sure, but eventually I thought, well, I've now collected a lot of Stooges films alongside the short. So I thought, well, what about Snow White and the Three Stooges, which it has a fantasy element, and we needed something like that to get it into this series. So I proposed that in the first instance, and they were a little bit unsure. And then I thought, well, maybe not a complete monograph just on this film, but a lot of background about the Stooges as well. And eventually I thought, well, why not a book about the Stooges? And I eventually sold them on this idea. Well, it was Neil Snowden by then, who was the and Guy Adams. They're the guys in charge, the editors on the line on that particular imprint. And so I went back and started looking at the Stooges all over again consecutively, and and finding the films I was missing because there were still a few obscure feature films. And the more I looked, the more I saw. And I mean, there's a quote from oh, hell's teeth, Bridget Fonda, who says, if you think you don't like the Stooges, you've never really looked. And in fact, that resonated with me. And I'm always it's always been my attitude that the best function of criticism is to make us look again at things we've taken for granted. And that's what I kind of tried to do in this book. And as I say, I began to find themes and, recurring motifs, and this whole thing about the inchoateness of their identity and the fact that they nearly always start off doing one job and, 5 minutes later they're doing a different one. They've shifted persona. And that they kind of call they're sort of agents of chaos, lords of misrule, who, basically invade usually a sort of upper class environment and cause utter mayhem. But it doesn't necessarily touch them. It's that they infect everybody else. Unlike Laurel and Hardy, who tend to be, the prime movers, the Stooges tend, to somehow to pass it on to everybody. So everybody else becomes the stooge. And I mean, in fact, when we get to the 3D Stooge films, there were only a couple in the 50s, we, the audience, we're actually poked in the eye in 3D. So that's the ultimate stoogedom, if you like. But here's the thing, that the more I wrote, the more I found. And the more I found, the more I discovered there was still to find. And there were lost movies. So I had to say in the first printing of the book, well, several films now appear to be lost. And then between that and the second and third printing, they showed up online. I mean, it's inexplicable, but somebody had found them and put them up. And here they are. So, of course, I had to write about them. So, in fact, the expanded printings of the book, the book, it's the never-ending book, basically. It will never end. Every time I think, yes, it's done now. Oh, no, it's not, because you've just found something else. Did you know, for instance, there's now a comic book called The Three Stooges Meet Cthulhu?
This I did not know.
There you are.
But I'm going to have to look for it now.
Yeah, you're going to have to find it now.
Hopefully it doesn't poke them in his 8 eyes or whatever. Well,
yes.
You need one extra stooge.
Did you know that Quentin Tarantino had made a Stooges film? No. Well, I mean, okay, I say a Stooges film. It's only about 3 minutes, a little squib. But the point is, it's basically and I discovered incidentally, he apparently regards all his films, Tarantino, he regards all his films as comedies, which is a bit disconcerting, you might think. I mean, I know that some of them are pretty funny in part, but I'm not entirely certain I would take them all as comedies, but there you are. I mean, I think a lot of my novels are comedies, so I can't talk. But this particular thing, and you can find it online, because he did it for someone like Conan O'Brien, would it be? One of the talk show hosts anyway? It ran it. And what the basic setup is, supposing, you did all the Stooges slapstick and it had, physical effects. So you poke them in the eye and their eyes pop out, I mean, it's funny because it's gruesome. But there it is. It's black and white, so you can find that. And of course, we know, well, because I know, in fact, that you've done a previous podcast that covers The Evil Dead and its Stooges roots. Yeah. But you'll appreciate, that Sam Raimi and friends were actually, perhaps, did you know that they were making 8mm Stooges shorts themselves before Evil Dead?
Yeah, they loved the Stooges, and they were keeping track of the actual Stooge people, trying to meet them, and Yes,
and of course, Emil Sitka turns up in Intruder, the Scott Spiegel movie, which is rather a good slasher movie, which if people have not seen it, it's well worth catching up with Intruder. But there's Emil Sitka saying, hold hands, you lovebirds, his famous catchphrase from a Stooge film. So it never ends. The Stooges will always be with us, it seems to me, and Stoogedom will take over the world.
Well, it's interesting because you said And now it all makes sense, right? What you're
Yes.
saying in terms
Yeah,
of why it
it
was on
does.
channel 4.
Yep.
No, but you said channel
Yes.
4. It was
Yes.
designed to create chaos or
Yeah. Yeah.
subversion.
Yeah.
Said, why are the Stooges on? And you're saying, now looking back, they were the agents of chaos.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, but also this horror humor thing. I think that's something that's been around for a long time about
Oh,
doing it
yeah.
correctly and right brings out the best elements of both. Because if you
Yeah.
just say
Yeah.
horror, 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 you just burn out. Humor,
Mm.
humor, humor, you turn out versus
Yeah.
peaks and valleys about here's the
Yeah.
humor about something horrible. And in
Yes. Yes.
psychiatry and all this, we know like humor is considered the ultimate defense, is one of the greatest defense
Yes.
mechanisms
Yes.
against
Yes.
stress and horror. If you don't
Yeah.
have humor, that's like considered one of the most sophisticated and best things you can do when there's terror and horror and things beyond control to handle. So
Yes.
everything you're saying makes total sense.
Yeah.
And I can see that's why you and others seem to like, even though it's like, wow, he's a horror writer, but he loves
Yes.
the Stooges. It seems to be this, it's like, how can you do horror without the Stooges?
Absolutely. Did you know The Shining, the Stanley Kubrick movie, is an extended Stooges tribute?
This I did not know at
Well,
all.
that's my argument. Let me put it this way. Now, other people say, no, The Shining really is a confession on Kubrick's part that he staged the moon landing, and all the clues are there.
That, yes,
If you
that I
look for
heard of.
them, no, all the clues are there if you look for them, that it's a Stooges tribute. And look, I'll give you only one. You remember the staircase scene? Well, how could we forget it, with
Yes,
the baseball bat, right? Yeah? Wendy, give
that's
me the
right.
bat, give me the bat. I go, boing. Well, it's a
Boing.
go, isn't it? Give me the wrench, dummy, give me the wrench, boing. It's the same thing. It's a gag. It's a Stooges gag.
I don't know why I want to do this now, but if I ever get around to it, where you take out the soundtrack
Yeah.
of the and then you put in humorous thing and boing and boing if you like what you had boing and like
Yeah,
almost
yeah,
like Bugs
yeah,
Bunny stuff. If you
yeah.
actually did, because again, when it comes to a film, it's very interesting. It's all these different elements put together, but if you
Oh,
change
yeah.
some of the elements, it can look completely different,
Oh,
and it
very
could be
much
suddenly a
so.
comedy stooge show.
Darling, light of my life, I'm not gonna hurt you. You didn't let me finish my sentence. I said, I'm not gonna hurt you. I'm just gonna bash your brains. I'm gonna bash them right the fuck in. I'm not gonna hurt you. Stop swinging the bat. Put the bat down. Give me the bat. Stop swinging the bat. Give me the bat. Ready? Give me the bat. Give me the bat.
Yeah. Oh no, I mean this is it. There was the
Yeah.
famous thing about Psycho, the shower scene without the music. It's not the same. Equally, Torn Curtain, the Hitchcock film, the very prolonged murder scene in that. Bernard Herrmann originally wrote music for that, but no, it didn't work. So they used natural, a sort of version of natural sound, and that's what works there. But equally, the Stooges without their sound effects. And in fact, interestingly now, a film I actually came to like very much, actually. I think, I mean, not all Stooges fans do. Some loathe it. But I thought the Farrelly brothers film, the Three Stooges
Oh,
film, the
yeah,
recent
yeah.
one. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was actually probably their best film. I thought it was very funny and, very affectionate. But, it has everything that Stooges fans would expect, the sense, the sort of gags that you would expect. But it's always, as with the Stooges films, they often, or not they so much as their director, usually Jules White, would repeat a variation of a familiar gag, but it would always be a variation. And the same is true in the Farrelly Brothers film, that, that they do familiar gags, but it's their take on them. And I thought that was a remarkable achievement, that actually, and I'm very fond of it.
Well, it gets back to again going in with the right mindset. Well, a
Mhm.
mindset versus are they competing to be better? No, they're doing it as a homage, doing their
Yeah,
version, but it's out of love. And you go, I'll see it like that
that's right.
versus I'm going to compare it to the original. They're not as good as the
Yeah,
original. Well, they're not
yeah,
trying to be. They're
yeah,
not.
yeah. Well, that's right.
Yeah, and then you're in this antagonistic view with the film
Yes, that's
versus
right.
missing the point of it.
But that was the thing I was going to say, that in fact they had to I believe they bought the original sound effects because it didn't work as well without those, and trying to replicate them didn't work either. So all of them were invented by one guy whose name suddenly for the moment I've forgotten, but for the original short films, there was just this one chap who came up with all those sounds. Of course, Laurel and Hardy had a few great boings as well, if you remember. But I think it's the Stooges above all who perfected them, if you like, and you've got to have them, or it's just not the same.
Too much. Oh, well. Yeah, Cut it out. Hold the horse. Never get his order. Huh? Didn't you? Boys around here.
Which goes to show you it's that ensemble kind of mixture of alchemical mix again about
Mhm.
it's not just the acting, it's not just the visuals, it's the sound, but also
Yeah,
music. It like
yes,
somehow if it hits the right cadence, boing, you got your
yeah,
your
yeah,
classics.
yes,
But
right.
yeah, but it's a fascinating thing that I said, like the Stooges keep appearing
Mhm.
as I keep talking to people about horror, and
Yeah,
it's fascinating. And also, I like the fact that you're saying, like, some people kind of go, "Oh, I just want to have this book done," and it goes away.
mm.
It's something I thought about why a lot of people are still successful doing the arts is they're passionate about what they do.
Oh
They
yeah,
love it. It's not
yeah,
like they
yeah,
just do it as a job. It's like,
sure.
no, it's like, oh, I'll do the seventh edition of this
Yeah,
book because I
yes, oh
love
yeah,
it.
yeah,
Why
yeah,
not? It's not like, oh,
yeah,
I'm tired of it. No, I'm not
yeah,
getting tired of it. And oh,
yeah.
a new thing pops up. I will add it
That's
in
right,
because
that's right.
it's interactive, it's living. There's just like
Yep,
a lot of your characters, they come to life after a while. It's like,
yes,
and other people kind of like, oh, they put spins on it. But you seem to
yeah,
be the type that like to share, which I find
yeah,
also is for a lot of the more passionate. It's like I'm not going to hold it all. I
yeah.
want you to kind of run with it. Attribution. I'm a big believer in attribute,
Yeah.
and pay homage to the
Oh
originator.
yes, yes, yes.
But usually the originator go, yeah, please go
Yeah,
forward with it.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Because we're all in this together.
That's right. Yes, yes.
Yeah. So speaking of then, what are you up to nowadays? Are you up to any cool projects, appearing
Always,
anywhere? What are
always.
you up to now?
Well, gee whiz, what am I doing right now? Well, I'm in the process of rewriting the next novel, which will be for like next year now. There's a novel coming out in the autumn, a new one. But I mean, the way it goes with me, I always write. Well, I can't actually show you. Well, I can sort of show you something. I always write longhand, so this isn't the first draft, but it's notes for the
Mhm.
first draft, basically. But I always write in an exercise book, or in innumerable exercise books, the first draft, and then that gets put aside for some months and come back to it, reread it. That's probably the most dispiriting part of the process, because I can see all that's wrong with it, but not how to fix it. But on the other hand, or sometimes I can see how to fix it, but often enough I can't. I just know this is not good. But the point is, you can't fix something unless you can see it's wrong. So that is an important part of it. And then probably shortly after that end of things, I'll start rewriting, and that is onto the computer. And a completely different mindset comes into play, much more and more so for me these days, actually. And I'll become as ruthless as I can be. And everything I can rewrite or even jettison, I do. And everything basically is up for grabs. Everything has to justify itself. Otherwise, it goes, either gets redone or it gets thrown out. And I take great relish, actually. I mean, just in the terms of this rewrite right now. There was one chapter, and I thought, well, actually, no, the writing is all right, but we really don't need this chapter. So, right, goodbye to that then, and it's gone. Maybe I could recycle the odd bit of it somewhere, but I don't know. And if not, too bad. But I just needed it to get to the next bit, but I don't need it in itself. So it's gone. And then eventually, when I finished this rewrite, then that big rewrite, I'll print it out, read through that, and there's always some tinkering to be done at that stage. And then eventually, now off it goes to my agent. I got to tell you, I always think they're not going to like this. I think I just say, this isn't what we expect of you, so no, we can't touch it. Or, oh no, you've done this too often, and now you're just repeating yourself. So do something else. So I need that encouragement of people say, no, actually, we liked it after all. So hell, so far they have. So that's why I carry on.
Two things popped to mind. One is I'm going to ask if you can give us any hints what it's about. But the first thing is, have you heard of Julie Cameron and the morning pages and the creative process and all that, where you have to
no.
think? She's the one who taught. Oh, okay. This is because something I do, and it's an exercise, but it reminds me of what you're doing too, which is her thing is you think, you create, and you edit later. If you edit before you create, you never actually write. And so there was this thing about every morning writing 3 pages of free-flowing thought in hand, which is the creative. Like, get used to letting your thoughts come onto the page, but do not edit it. Don't touch it. Let it flow. That's not even like, just to kind of get used to it and edit later. Don't do editing. And what you're doing reminds me of that. It's like you're writing in freehand in these books, but the computer part is a completely new mindset. But you didn't get to it till you let yourself put it all out there in raw form, which kind of makes sense, in the sense that maybe that's also why you keep doing it versus nowadays. And it's one of the other topics I often ask people: what do you think about AI and people writing and using ChatGPT and writing novels?
Not for me. No.
Well, I hope not. Yeah.
No.
Yeah, but it's like, oh my God. Versus, you're sick. Like, again, I think maybe AI is useful for certain things. Like, okay, some made a meeting or something, but please don't take over the central creative process of the human being.
Yes,
but
no.
yeah, but it sounds like your method has been there for it works.
Sure.
And so that's why you say, like, you have all these cool books still writing.
Yeah.
People go, why are you writing? Why aren't you just typing?
Yes. Yes. No, I never do that. Funny enough, I do non-fiction directly onto the keyboard, but never fiction.
It makes sense, because I guess you're taking facts that are already existing and aligning them, and
yeah.
Versus it's interesting. But again, there is some research showing that writing with your hand in the old cursive thing is different than typing, and it creates different processes in the brain. That all being said, then, any hints on what the novel is, or you want to keep it all wrapped?
Oh, sorry, I beg your pardon. Well, let me. The one that's coming out this year, the central issue of that, basically, and this is what I believe, is that I won't even say exorcism. I'll say, attempts to exorcise children. as far as I'm concerned, that's child abuse. It's a form of child abuse, and
Mm,
frequently dangerous and damaging, and far too often fatal. And so that's central to this book. But it is there is a supernatural element. It's basically about a couple who become obsessed with the idea that their young child is possessed, and what happens then. But it's seen from the viewpoint of a grandparent, who is attempting to intervene.
mm.
And well, one thing I was delighted by, I work with a wonderful copy editor called Imogen Howson, Imi Howson, and I mean, it's one of these things I found encouraging. She said it's probably her favorite of my novels that she's read. So again, I must be doing something right. So that's that one for this year. The one I'm doing now,
Oh,
which
does
is
it have
called,
a title?
oh, sorry, I beg your pardon. Yes, it's called An Echo of Children.
Okay.
Well, that's
So we'll
cool.
make sure we'll keep our eyes out for it.
Yeah, that's in September. Comes out in
Mm,
September. And then next year's is called Ancestral. Um,
mm.
and well, how can I put it? It's about how a conflict between two occultists in the long past kind of feeds down the generations and eventually produces something in the present day. And that's
Okay.
vague. That's vague to
That's
a
good.
fault. That's all I can say.
Yeah, but it's good enough in the sense that it's a good teaser, that's for sure. You said,
Mhm.
through the generations, something coming. Yeah, it does. It's like evoking the imagination is
Sure.
good.
Well, that's
Oh
what I
yeah,
try to do. Yeah.
yeah. And I take
Not
it
least
like,
my own.
yeah. And it sounds like writing is a central part of you. It's just one of your
Oh yeah.
passions that you keep doing.
Oh yeah. You bet.
Yeah.
Yeah. 7 days a week.
Cool. And are you appearing anywhere? Or like, I don't know if you go to conventions or people kind of get you out
Oh
places or.
yes. Well, let me see. There's going to be a sort of an online thing in June.
Oh,
From
yeah.
the British Fantasy Society. So that'll be a sort of I think a little sort of virtual mini convention, as I understand it. So that's on the 21st of June. And then
Ah,
there's the World Fantasy Convention in Brighton, in England, in October. And I'm what they very kindly call the horror laureate there. So I shall be all over the program, I believe.
very
So
nice.
anyway, you can't miss me even if you try. I'll be unavoidable there for that weekend, I think.
Well,
And then
excellent.
I believe I may be in Madrid next spring, which sounds good to me. Yeah, Madrid is a
Very
great
good.
place. The other thing is, it's got the most terrifying junctions I've ever seen. They're the sort of the size of a city block, and you can get lost and go from one side to the other, which I once did, believe me. But there you are.
Well, that's excellent that people still are, you are a legend in the field, I believe,
Well,
and you
well,
are a
thank
living
you.
legend, which is even best to get
Well,
actually
you think
meet
I'm
you.
living? How do you know?
It's an assumption.
I
It's
could be
true.
a hologram here.
That's true. Being
Or
controlled
an
by some sort of
AI.
aliens.
Maybe I'm AI. Here we go,
That's
you
true.
see.
And I
I
only
fooled
appear in
you.
virtual. That's true. Maybe you're like in a virtual. That's why you're at the virtual meetings and everything too.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Well, hopefully I'll see you in person someday. Who
I hope
knows?
so. I hope
In the
so.
UK. But I'll post all these things up, and this interview will be probably going up on June 20th. Was my
Okay.
plan
Oh,
too. So it'll
excellent.
be you'll have that whole weekend of like
Yeah,
Ramsey
yeah.
Campbell weekend. Um,
Absolutely.
so I've kept you for an hour, and I really appreciate you taking time to talk with me. But any final reflections on stuff we've been talking about? Anything popped to mind as we've been going through this, or anything you wanted to add before
Oh,
we
we,
wrap
we,
up?
we, we, we could talk for another hour, couldn't we? Really, we've only just started.
And
But
or maybe, well, I can have you on again. Like
yeah, let's
again,
do it
like
again. I think that's
after
my
you,
thought. Let's do it again. Let's do it
that
again.
would be great.
Yeah,
Okay. Well, thank you very much again.
my
And I
pleasure.
will post all the things of where you're coming up to. And I appreciate this greatly. And I'm hoping people who watch this will also, again, think about their creative processes and learn
Mhm.
from your experience.
You bet. You bet.
Okay.
Bruce, thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. Thank you.